On a foggy July morning in the outskirts of Des Moines, Iowa, as school buses began their rounds through the Pleasant Hill district at 8 a.m., Catherine Reynolds' smartphone rang. The screen displayed Pleasant Hill Elementary. Kathy had just finished changing out of her scrubs after working the night shift at the hospital. "Mrs. Reynolds, we need to discuss Mason." "Ms. Edwards," his teacher's worried voice came through the receiver. "He's been absent for a week straight. We can't reach his parents. Actually, there have been several concerns since last month." Ms. Edwards continued, choosing her words carefully. "Mason's behavior has changed. He used to love talking about animals and was so proud of his father's work, but lately he's been withdrawn. His clothes are often dirty." Kathy closed her eyes and let out a deep sigh. At 63, she had worked as a nurse in the university hospital's emergency surgery department for 35 years. She had seen countless critical situations, but the tightness in her chest now was second only to when she lost her husband 3 years ago. "I understand. I'll go check on them." After hanging up, Kathy changed out of her white nurse's shoes and grabbed her car keys. Usually, she visited once a month, but lately, she had been worried about her son and daughter-in-law. Derek and Victoria's only response was always that they were busy. She could only see her grandson Mason when they weren't home. She glanced at the photo frame on the kitchen counter. It was taken last Christmas, with the whole family together. Derek wore a proud smile, having inherited his father's successful pig farm. Victoria, a former Las Vegas casino dealer, had joined the farm's operations thanks to her accounting skills. Between them stood Mason, carefully holding the veterinary kit he'd received from Santa. "If only we could go back to those days." Murmuring to herself, Kathy climbed into her Ford Explorer. The Pleasant Hill morning was quiet. She passed by neat rows of farms and pastures. After driving through an avenue of old trees, the red roof of the pig farm came into view. An unusual odor seeped into the car. This farm, inherited from her father-in-law 3 years ago, had once been the region's most successful operation. It used to sweep state competitions every year. But the moment she drove through the gates, Kathy's spine froze. The employee parking lot was empty. Sam's pickup truck was nowhere to be seen. The veteran employee of over 20 years had vanished. The barn doors were left open, with several pigs lying down. They clearly showed signs of illness. The office looked as if it had been robbed. Papers were scattered across the floor, and error messages flashed on the computer screen. All the desk drawers were open, and the ledgers showed traces of suspicious transactions. Client names and amounts were hastily scrawled by hand. What happened? From her emergency surgery experience, Kathy instinctively sensed something. At the hospital, she had dealt with abuse cases many times. Abuse from family members often shows warning signs. At 10 a.m., as the summer sun grew stronger, Kathy headed toward the pig barn. She heard faint sobbing. Maintaining the composure developed through years of nursing experience, she entered the barn. In the dim light at the back of the barn, her 6-year-old grandson sat on the muddy floor. Sick pigs lay around him amid a foul stench. Mason was taking handfuls of pig feed and fearfully putting it in his mouth. "Grandma, I'm hungry." His thin voice gripped Kathy's heart. His clothes were covered in mud, with bruises visible all over. Tear tracks marked his gaunt cheeks. His arms showed clear signs of abuse. To her nurse's eyes, the signs of malnutrition were evident. "It's all right now, you're safe." While holding her grandson, Kathy slowly took out her phone. Her hand trembled as she dialed her son and daughter-in-law's number. After several rings, her son's voice suddenly came through, accompanied by loud slot machine sounds. "Mom, don't bother us. Things are going great at the Bellagio right now." Victoria's loud laughter could be heard in the background. They were both clearly drunk. The chaos of Las Vegas carried through the receiver. "Derek, come back immediately. This is serious, about Mason. I told you not to interfere. We're in the middle of a winning streak. Victoria's found a foolproof system. We'll pay off our debts in no time." The call disconnected, leaving a cold dial tone in her ear. "Don't tell Mom and Dad. It's because I was bad," Mason pleaded in a trembling voice. In the dim light of the pig barn, Kathy held her grandson tightly. In her 35 years of emergency surgery work, she had seen many critical situations. And she had never turned a blind eye. Even if it involved her own son and daughter-in-law. "You don't need to worry anymore." Kathy spoke quietly but firmly. "I will protect you." She picked up her phone again and dialed 911. Simultaneously, she sent a message to the hospital's pediatrician. The summer sunlight streamed into the barn, illuminating Mason's tear-stained cheeks. At 1 p.m., after the Pleasant Hill Police Department's investigation team had left, Kathy faced reality in the farm's office. Mason was undergoing examination at the hospital. She had returned to the farm temporarily to investigate the situation more thoroughly. On the desk lay 3 months' worth of unpaid bills. Payment demands from MidAmerican Energy for electricity, water supply termination notices, and feed company contract termination notices. Adding up the amounts made her dizzy. "I never imagined it was this bad." Opening the office refrigerator revealed it was completely empty. It seemed like a lie that Victoria used to make sandwiches for the employees. The kitchen shelves held only a few expired canned goods. Mason's room was as cold as winter. The air conditioning was set to its lowest temperature. Was it for saving money, or intentional abuse? Under the bed, she found a half-eaten bag of bread. Unopened letters from school were piled up, including repeated meeting requests from Ms. Edwards. "Kathy." Turning around, she saw Martha, her neighbor of 30 years, holding a thermos of warm coffee. "Could I talk to you for a minute?" Martha sat on the office sofa and sighed. Those two were fighting a lot at night. Last month, Derek was throwing things at Victoria. "I thought about calling the police, but..." She continued, choosing her words carefully. "Recently, unfamiliar cars have been coming and going, especially at night. This started after Sam and the others quit. I was worried they might be involved in something illegal. Martha's testimony turned Kathy's suspicions into certainty. At 3 p.m., she visited the meat processing plant, a longtime business partner. Plant manager Johnson was an old acquaintance. "I'll be honest with you." Johnson lowered his voice. 2 months ago, Derek started demanding discounts. He tried to mix in sick pigs with the deliveries. He pulled documents from his desk drawer. Here's the evidence. The difference between quality inspection records and actual transaction amounts. We refused, but other processors. As she listened, the situation proved more serious than imagined. There were signs of trading sick pigs at low prices to other processors, a serious violation threatening food safety. Next, she met with Thompson, the Pleasant Hill branch manager. The bank records told the whole story. "Mrs. Reynolds, there have been over 10 withdrawals in Las Vegas in the past 2 months. Just the ATM fees alone are substantial." The manager pointed to the monitor history. "The farm account is nearly empty. The loans already exceed $1 million. The farmland itself is the collateral." How did it come to this? Actually, Victoria had been regularly cashing large checks. Said she needed cash for the casino. Branch manager Thompson lowered his voice. "We should have noticed earlier. Given her background. Victoria's past. Her connections from her Las Vegas casino dealer days. Everything started connecting." At 6 p.m., back at the farm, Kathy found old ledgers in the back of the warehouse. Records carefully kept since her father-in-law's time. Numbers showing the farm's golden age. And the rapid decline after her son and daughter-in-law took over. Notes were scribbled in the margins. Casino names, betting amounts, debt repayment plans. Evidence of pathological gambling addiction. Mrs. Reynolds. Food Safety Inspector Parker called out to her. He had been inspecting the farm since the afternoon. "We've confirmed multiple serious violations. Improper management of sick animals, ignored hygiene standards, and..." He continued, choosing his words carefully. "Evidence of illegal transactions. Business suspension is unavoidable." As darkness fell on the farm, police sirens approached. Pleasant Hill Police Detective Jenkins brought new reports. "We've obtained testimony from Sam, the former employee. Derek fired him violently and paid hush money." The detective opened his notebook. Other employees reported the same. They were all threatened. "And we received interesting information from Victoria's former colleagues. Details of illegal transactions using Victoria's casino connections began to emerge. The pediatrician caring for Mason at the hospital also called. Multiple bruises, malnutrition, and severe PTSD. This is clearly a case of abuse." As night fell on the farm, Kathy looked up at the moon. The instincts developed through 35 years of nursing had never failed her. The situation had progressed to its worst. But there was no more running away. Her phone rang. It was Child Protective Services, calling about tomorrow's protection procedures. Local TV stations were also flooding in with interview requests. The situation had grown beyond a single-family matter. Kathy sighed deeply while looking at Mason's photo. Tomorrow, her son and daughter-in-law would return from Las Vegas. The end, and simultaneously a new beginning, was just around the corner. At 10 p.m. in the pediatric ward of Pleasant Hill General Hospital, Kathy was developing an action plan at Mason's bedside. Her experience handling thousands of critical situations as a nurse now provided clear guidance. "Mrs. Reynolds, the records are complete." Dr. Martinez, the night duty physician, quietly approached. She handed over a thick file summarizing Mason's examination results. Photos of multiple bruises, detailed nutritional data, psychological evaluation results. All crucial evidence of abuse. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I'll submit a detailed report to Child Protective Services as well. In my 35-year career, I've rarely seen such a clear case of abuse." Dr. Martinez continued. "The psychological impact is particularly severe. The fact that he was eating animal feed in the pig barn." The fluorescent light fell on the doctor's profile as she struggled with her words. Late at night, with police permission, Kathy returned to the farm. This time for thorough evidence gathering. With a digital camera in hand, she documented every detail of the farm's condition. The poor hygiene in the pig barns. The condition of sick pigs. The scattered office. The mountain of recorded bills. And the place where Mason was found. The police forensics team had already taken detailed evidence photos. "Kathy." Martha came running with a flashlight, having heard noises. "Here, I've been taking videos." Her smartphone contained records from the past several months. Nighttime shouting, suspicious cars coming and going, sounds of objects being thrown. All dated and time-stamped. Those two were strange from the start. "But I never thought it would come to this." Martha's voice trembled. "I'll testify. I can't turn a blind eye anymore." Back home, Kathy sat at her computer. She digitized all the evidence, organizing it chronologically. With the precision developed through 35 years of nursing records, she documented each event. Then she began composing emails. Recipients: Child Protective Services, Health Department, Department of Agriculture, Food Safety Commission, local media. She would send detailed reports and evidence to all relevant agencies. Once sent, there would be no turning back. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the send button. Early morning, as the first responses began arriving, events moved rapidly. An unusual tension ran through the rural area, normally quiet at this hour. Police forensics teams arrived at the farm. Food safety inspectors gathered one after another. Local TV station vans lined the shoulder of the road, and helicopters began circling overhead. "Mrs. Reynolds, listen." Pleasant Hill Police Detective Jenkins brought new information. Arrest warrants have been issued for Derek and Victoria. Charges include child abuse, food safety violations, and fraud. Las Vegas police have been notified. Then a call came from the health department inspector. We've decided to dispose of all pigs on the farm. This is a serious violation threatening food safety. We're issuing an immediate execution order. The situation had grown beyond a family matter. It had become a major social issue involving regional food safety, children's rights, and agricultural business ethics. At noon, local TV stations began breaking news coverage. Serious violations discovered at established Pleasant Hill Pig Farm. Child abuse suspected. The phones wouldn't stop ringing. Interview requests, information from neighbors, offers of support. The quiet rural area of Pleasant Hill had suddenly become the center of attention. Mrs. Reynolds, your son and daughter-in-law have arrived at the airport. Detective Jenkins' report came around 3 p.m. At the hospital, the Child Protective Services social worker had finished interviewing Mason. Temporary protection procedures are complete. Mrs. Reynolds, let's apply for temporary custody as grandmother. As dusk approached at 5 p.m., police cars began waiting at the farm gate. Reporters gathered, camera flashes flashing. Neighbors quietly watched. And a taxi approached. Mom? What's this? Derek's face turned pale as he stepped out of the car. Victoria was speechless, frozen in place. Officers approached, reading the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Kathy watched it all unfold. Her observation skills, honed through 35 years of nursing, caught the look of regret on her son and daughter-in-law's faces. But now, it was too late. As night fell on Pleasant Hill, only stars quietly shone over the darkened pig farm. Mason showed a peaceful sleeping face in his hospital bed, for the first time in a long while. Tomorrow, a new life would begin. Kathy stood by the window, looking up at the moon. Sometimes, love means making tough decisions. That was the most important lesson her 35 years of nursing had taught her. In the Pleasant Hill Police Station interrogation rooms. As night deepened, Derek and Victoria were being questioned in separate rooms. Over $1 million in debt. Illegal trading of sick pigs. And above all, Detective Jenkins spread photos on the table. Mason's bruises, the pig barn conditions, the empty refrigerator. All evidence closing in on them. Why did you go this far? After a long silence, Derek spoke. At first, it was just a small bet. Victoria said she knew a sure way to win. In another room, Victoria was also breaking down. Casino acquaintances told me about an easy way to make money, but the losses kept mounting. Midnight at Pleasant Hill General Hospital's pediatric ward. Kathy sat at Mason's bedside, talking with the Child Protective Services worker. You're the most suitable temporary guardian as his grandmother. The social worker continued while signing documents. Mason's emotional healing will take time. But living with you will be the best therapy. Dawn broke over Pleasant Hill. Local news was filled with this case. Shocking revelations at established pig farm. Arrests made for child abuse and food safety violations. Family tragedy betrays community trust. The phone rang. It was the Department of Agriculture. We're completely revoking the pig farm's operating license. Disposal of all pigs will begin tomorrow. 1 week later. Pleasant Hill Courthouse. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecution sought severe penalties. Child abuse, food safety violations, fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The defendants' actions go beyond individual crimes. The prosecutor spoke forcefully. They threatened regional food safety, hurt an innocent child, and trampled the trust inherited from the previous generation. The defense argued diminished capacity due to gambling addiction, but the judge's expression remained stern. 1 month later. A new life had begun at Kathy's house. "Grandma, look." Mason returned from school. He proudly showed a test paper marked 100%. A letter from Ms. Edwards noted his remarkable recovery. "Well done." Kathy hugged her grandson. While the physical scars were healing gradually, it would take much more time to heal the emotional wounds completely. 3 months later, sentences were handed down. Derek and Victoria both received prison terms. For the combined charges of child abuse, food safety violations, and fraud, Derek received 7 years and Victoria 5 years. The farm was seized and would be used to repay debts. The once prestigious pig farm would be rebuilt under new ownership. 6 months later. Spring in Pleasant Hill. A small garden had been created in Kathy's yard. It was Mason's vegetable growing project for his school research. Tilling the soil, planting seeds, and nurturing new life held great meaning for his recovery. "Grandma, can we donate these vegetables to the animal shelter?" Kathy smiled at Mason's suggestion. Despite his painful experiences, he hadn't lost his kindness toward animals. If anything, he had developed an even deeper compassion. 1 year later. At Pleasant Hill Elementary School. "My dream is to become a veterinarian." Mason presented his future dream. In the classroom sat those who had supported his rescue: Ms. Edwards, Detective Jenkins, Martha, and Kathy watching proudly. "I want to help animals and people in trouble. Because I was helped too." His sincere words were met with warm applause from the audience. Mason's presentation was featured in the local newspaper. A boy's dream after recovering from abuse: what animals love taught him. The people of Pleasant Hill had learned much over this year. The importance of family bonds, community responsibility, and above all, that love and trust heal wounded hearts. People still gather at Kathy's house. On weekends, Mason's classmates play in the garden. The aroma of Martha's apple pie wafts through the air. And Detective Jenkins stops by to report updates. Mason was growing up healthy. His night terrors had decreased. His smiles had increased. And he had begun talking about his hopes for the future. Then, one quiet dusk. Kathy sat on the backyard bench, watching the sunset. "Grandma, thank you." Mason snuggled close to her. In her 35 years as a nurse, Kathy had witnessed many life crises. Sometimes forced to make tough decisions. Sometimes shedding tears. And always striving not to lose hope. Now, she was certain. This decision had not been wrong. In the evening sky over Pleasant Hill, a sunset spread across the horizon, promising a new tomorrow.